Okay, I'd like to call the Woodbury County Board of Adjustment meeting to order. It looks like all five members are present. The time is 6 o'clock. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Board of Adjustment. Today's date is October 3rd and the time is 6 o'clock. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and the minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask that those present turn off cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet up on the front table. I'd like to take a moment to review the procedures that the board will follow tonight. First, the board will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. Planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you would like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please state your first name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with all your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the board. The board shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the board. The board will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any board member who has ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to beginning of deliberation of the respective agenda item. Any person desiring to appeal the board's decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after the filing of this decision with the Planning and Zoning Office. So with that, have you guys had a chance to review the minutes from the previous meeting? Does anybody have anything to add to them or any discrepancies? Okay, we have a motion. Okay, motion and a second to approve last meeting's minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Let's see, next I'm going to open the public hearing and I would like to ask Dan to read the staff report.
Yeah, public comments.
Oh, okay. Are there any public comments for something that is not on the agenda tonight? Does not appear we have any public comments then for an item not on the agenda. Is there anybody online that wishes to speak?
It appears that there's nobody over the telephone.
Okay. Okay, so then I would like to open the public hearing and ask Dan to read the staff report.
Okay. Donna Egerling has filed a variance application to request to build a 42-foot wide by 56-foot depth by a 25-foot high accessory storage shed 43 feet from the right-of-way line or equal to the distance in which the house is from the right-of-way. This is located at 3 Rose Lane in the Sunview subdivision, Lot 3, Agricultural Estates Zoning District, parcel number 89463. 11000011. The property owner's application indicates that his house is 76 feet from the center of road, which includes 30 feet of right of way, 33 feet of right of way, and 43 feet of his front yard. It appears that the right of way is 30 out there with the concrete surface for the record, but the hardship is a result of not having an ideal location to place the accessory structure on the property as a result of the elevation and an existing accessory structure. The owner indicates that without a variance, I am unable to utilize my property to its fullest potential in a similar manner to other property owners on our street and in our county. The proposed location is the only logical choice due to the way the property is situated, including the house, shed, and slope of the property, end quote. The proposal has been properly noticed in the Sioux City Journal's legal section on September 28, 2022. The neighbors within 500 feet have been duly notified via September 22nd, 2022 letter about tonight's October 3rd, 2022 Board of Adjustment public hearing, and been requested to comment. As of September 29th, where the printing of this packet, since the packet's been printed, I did have one inquiry to the office just to kind of ask about it, but no written information there. And did have an anonymous type of statement, but the official policy is when a notification letter goes out to the public that it must be signed comments basically to the public. And so I just wanted to let you know there was kind of one that was out there with anonymous. Okay, appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, and organizations have been notified and have been requested to comment. There were a couple significant comments that were received by the Siouxland District Health Department and the Woodbury County Engineer, which comments are included in the packet. Siouxland District Health indicated that they would not recommend constructing a building over the connecting line of the septic system. However, they find through their research with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources that Chapter 69 does not address connecting lines under prohibited construction in their criteria. And they, from the state level and from Siouxland District Health level, cannot prohibit the accessory building. The Woodbury County Engineer does not provide support for the variance as per his enclosed statement in the comments section, and he kind of elaborates on some situations as it pertains to the driveway, which is included in the packet. This area property is not included or in the floodplain area. In terms of staff, based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance, this proposal could meet the minimum criteria to be considered for approval, with some elevation shifts and an existing structure on the premises that obstructs the ability to meet the setback and inconsistencies with the front yard setbacks within the subdivision. The area has some limitations to place the requested structure. Ideally, the property owner should consider removing the existing structure, as that would enable the setback to be met. There are also possible other locations that could require some grading and maybe vegetation, tree removal on the site. Thus, in consideration of Siouxland District Health not being able to prohibit the accessory building over the septic line as a result of Chapter 69 of Iowa Administrative Code, and the zoning ordinance section 4.06 not addressing septic lines, this variance could be approved with conditions that the property owner, as part of the building permit application, provides an accurate and professional site plan established and certified by a septic system time of transfer inspector that clearly identifies and illustrates the exact location of the septic tank, septic connecting lines, and septic leach field, while ensuring that the leach field and septic tank are at a minimum of 10 feet or more away from the structures as required by district health policy. Also acknowledge the property owner would have to acknowledge and accept all the risks and liabilities associated with the construction and placement of the structure above a septic connecting line, and ensure that the accessory storage shed shall not be constructed closer to the front lot line, right-of-way line, than the front edge of the closest point of the principal structure from the right-of-way line. And See, with that said, the multi-criteria that the Board of Adjustment would make the decision based upon is within the packet. And with that said, that's all I've got. Can ask for the public or the applicant to offer to.
Okay, does anyone in the public want to offer testimony or comments on this issue? Okay, go ahead.
My name's Don Hagerling. I'm the one that asked for variance. I appreciate you listening to me. Taking this under advisement. So, Dan's, your packet that you got, lays it out pretty clearly. There's a couple of things we'll have to address the septic. So we do know exactly where the septic tank is and field lines are. And there is a title transfer included in your packet last. I think it shows the way the line, the clean water line. Leaves the septic 8.5 feet underground and travels north on third line back to the field.
That's the line that's in question.
That's the line that's in question.
The leach line, the leach line.
Not the leach, clean water line going to
To the leach field.
If, and so that starts at 8.5 feet underground. Building that is situated right in the middle between that and where the leach field is. The curvature of that looks like it would be underneath the front left corner of the building. So it wouldn't go under that. I didn't know that. I probably had that transfer in when I bought the house 8 years ago. So it's where the building's gonna be, that line would be at least 8.5 feet underground. The grade level of the building would be no lower than where the lead to this 8.5 feet above the line. So I don't find that to be an issue. Just on my end, we have to take responsibility of something that could happen. Figure out the line and set it with it. Take that off my license. So I'm not concerned with that. Obviously, it sounds like that it's not after the regulation. He's just doing it. There's not another good place in the property. Got a really nice shelter belt to the north end. Kind of blocks of the building was from the house. West end. Got another. So it's like a perfect location. I could remove that. The slope of the ground is pretty severe. From the street level goes up and down pretty severe. Just we're scraping off a little bit off the top of that crown. That area. All of the houses on our street except one fail to meet that 75-foot regulation. Nobody has ever back that except one on our street. Pictures of it. So, I mean, I'm not trying to put this thing right up next to the building, in the back half or behind where my house is. Off to the side. On a nice building, so I can't take it my truck. There's motorcycles.
Overhead picture on page 16. It shows the line pretty much.
Right, yeah, but that didn't know.
Where we at
On page 25, 8 of your package, that's the transfer of the market property. So the location of the field line and the location of the septic tank are correct on that drawing we're looking at. This is from
So the building itself, how much you said is going to be on the one building? The original picture, I mean, I'm not saying that's accurate, shows the line going right straight.
If you curve that line like it shows on the transfer that
So
the
if you-
inspector of the thing did when he came out.
If you were like that,
It would be well. So it is underneath of it, but like I said, it's 9 feet under ground level of the building.
I have a question that I don't think anybody can answer, but 69, chapter 69 references septic system, and right now there is no restrictions or nothing that prohibits from building on top of that. If that law chapter language gets changed where you cannot, what's that do to existing law? Would all existing structures be grandfathered in?
It would, not an attorney, but it would likely be, this scenario was brought up to Cement District Health. And what they had done was they looked at the policy with chapter 69. And this was such a unique situation, almost like an outlier policy, that they went to the DNR for me in this research process. And as you see in the backup material, they had mentioned that after reaching out to DNR, they highlighted this chapter 69 as being, or they don't really have a regulatory reach to say. And they even reference that they're going to have to address this, you're going to have to go underneath and have to bore it. And the time of transfer scenarios when they end up catching a violation of some sort, if it's not exempt. So if he were to make a sale to a family member, that's different if he was to put it out
You don't
to
have to go through that type of transfer.
and so chapter 69 is now on their radar in terms of looking at it for.
I guess
Possible revision.
that's where my concern is if 15, 18, 25, 35 years from now, we go to sell this to another party and time transfer goes back. You can't do that, that's in the books. Would there be something to say that this, as an illegal document on your abstract, to say that this was legal at the time? Because, like I said, I don't think anybody can answer that. That's kind of concern to me. Typically, anytime you build a structure over any type of septic system, it has to be cast iron. Not saying that that's what you should do or anything like that, but I'm wondering how much of a hardship would it be to move the building back enough? It would be grade issues, so that wasn't a concern. Because I can see this somewhere down the line, when somebody.
Like me.
Well, it's,
Sell it, probably, but
yeah,
the same way that when they did the time of transfer, I bought the property, the inspector has found anything wrong. The homeowner would have to fix it or I would have to fix it.
and I've gone through a time of transfer inspection myself, not always that thorough. So, I just, and I engage are both pretty rigid. So I can see something like this coming back to haunt somebody later on, even though you're willing to accept that. But that's a concern of mine.
Well, and especially if it's on their radar right now with this coming up, then they, usually that's how legislation and regs get revised, is when we have outlier situations that they recognize that they need to include an update.
Yes, and I may share that this time of transfer documentation is really not the best in terms of, it doesn't indicate to you what the distances are between the tank and up and to the fields. And I inquired with Paige about this, Paige Nelson with District Health. And so it's kind of, as was written in the staff report, imperative that that be identified, this is be clarified, officially measured to know where those assets are. And the key part of the zoning, in a sense, I should say, what the district health is, that you got to be 10 off of the leach field, you've got to be 10 off of the tank. So, I mean, that's something that probably could easily be confirmed, but yet it would have to be confirmed.
Location of the building is right in the middle, or there's lots of room. Way more.
Building the long part of it is going east and west.
I had a concern when I was reading this about what Mark Nera, the Woodbury County engineer, had to say about the driveway. So you're going to address,
Yes.
okay.
That was the next thing I had after reading the report. So So his letter insinuates that I put that in after they have told me that I could. And that is absolutely 100% wrong. I bought my camper last spring. I contracted my concrete blows, the guy that I know that worked on the power plant. He will come and put that in. There are at least 8 other properties, same size as mine, so, yeah, it's under a mile, that's the thing. I never thought it was, ever dreamed it would be finished. I told Nick, I wanted a first grind and put a little eight in there, so it's easier to back my camper. And he was supposed to get it, but I called him when he brought that to my attention last Thursday. My concrete guy, I'm like, hey, this is confirming. That is. But we were supposed to go by that last time. I don't know if they ever found it, but it's got great files on it. But I'm sorry, it was a mistake.
But are you gonna have to remove that driveway to be in compliance?
Yeah, they'll let me know.
They haven't let you know, because that would be a concern as to how you would get your camper in there without a direct.
Can't do that.
There's good reason why they have that rule, but if you work street, doesn't seem like it'd be much of an issue, but that's what Mark was gonna, he's gonna do on that, I don't know.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of them. Even the first house on the street, it's the good news. It's commonplace. So there's 8 of them. I went and looked around, and looked this week. Because I didn't know that he, anyway, that it's in the wrong. I absolutely, it was put in on June the 3rd. That's when the concrete actually went in. Just about 3 months later, for the first time I heard about it. So I didn't talk to anybody at the county. I left that to my contractor. Build buildings, move to America, and contractors get to build permits. Yeah. So I wanted to make the record straight on that. As far as I could tell, I think those were the only two that came up, either with back there or not. That's not right. Really, the man, water line regulation there. Facts of it, where it's all right out, back in my house. Yeah, it's-
And
Let's get a question.
me, I guess, I can appreciate your concerns with it, but it's our job that
I understand.
we're going to have concerns. And the septic line is one that you could go for 50 years and never have a problem, maybe even further, never have a problem, but, kind of puts us in this situation of a what if type thing. And, to at least explore other options if there are any. I know when you want to build a building, things happen with me, this is what I want to put in, well, this is what I want to put, but sometimes you don't have that luxury, even though they don't have a rule prohibiting you from building over that. Which doesn't, for me, doesn't mean that I would say yes or I would say no either way. It's just something that I might visit about a little bit. That
So
doesn't
if you
mean
push it to the north, then you get closer to the leach field. Push it to the south. you get closer to the center. There's not a good location.
the road itself is north and south, correct?
Road street.
So what would, if it went further east, what would that do to you?
I can't go further east because I have a outbuilding directly behind there where the building would, I'd have to tear that out.
Is there any possibility that you could,
It's a really nice, very nice property.
It is.
A lot of areas, just gems in town.
I mean, I would absolutely move it back. I don't have a problem with that. But there's a building in the way. If I have one other structure on the property, it's right in the way of that. So there's no good way to put this building other than that.
Is there any possibility that you can make it small, a little bit smaller to avoid going right over that septic?
This is for your viewer.
Hector almost a little bit long. So it takes
45, what, building 45?
building is 56.
56, okay.
I assume you're gonna cement the floor, but
I hope, I'm planning to, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
The variance was permitted, and, what if scenario, would that act as a document, for, they updated the chapter 69? That help as a grandfathered in condition there, the fact that, we documented it at the time, or?
It could be something put into a resolution to identify scenario that when which you're faced, which most variance resolutions should have elements of what goes to the proceedings into it as the whereas statements.
Health department have copies of time transfer documentation. Where are these documents officially for?
Those documents are in the recorder's office, and Siouxland District Health uses them quite frequently. Again, those particular documents are pretty much sketches. My understanding are the newer ones with the
They're getting a little more
staff are a bit more sophisticated. So that's one of the things that they had made to me was that you would have to specifically, especially through the building permit, know exactly where that leach field is and exactly where that tank is officially, to the point of even having a surveyor to identify the pins and everything so that there is no encroachment on there. Because even though we're talking about the line, the big thing is still leach. You gotta know where that leach is. You can't encroach on it. You can't encroach over the tank.
Going to the east would put you over the line further, wouldn't it? If I'm looking at the map right? If you move the building to the east,
I think
These could be bad away from the street.
this would be like.
It would improve. If it's at that angle.
There's only,
see the,
go back maybe another 5 feet or so, I gotta have some slope there for drainage. Before it goes into that other building, right? If I can get pretty close to that building, I can go right up next to it.
if I may, typically center of the road and defines your right of way. I guess switch us over to feet. So this could be about a 30 with the SUDAS requirement, but where you have the teal line is your right of way line. So if we draw from this point forward, the right of way line, and we get ourselves to the official setback, which would be your 75 for that zoning district, and we kind of draw across the property, you'll see the challenge there is that some of the houses, in particular here, are inside of the traditional setback, but you can kind of tell if I think that this is the northern part of your garage, that you kind of measured there, that you can kind of tell that it seems to be 75 from center of the road, and we can go down and look at each house in the neighborhood, and they seem to be following that consistent pattern.
They have
So
similar frontages.
So, yeah, and so we can't outright permit, because of this being a public road, public right of way, closer to that right of way line. And that's why we're here, because a building permit could be issued if we drew the structure in here and in here somewhere, and I'm not putting the accurate distances in, but can you place it here? But if we drop the board and say, obviously the cul-de-sac will push the setback line back, but if we just kind of imagine there and we put a line here, there would be space up here or down the line as long as you're 75 feet back.
That would be over the leach field.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he has to consider the
Yeah,
leach
yeah.
field, he has to consider the tank, and he probably would, you know, probably bring up elevation, some of those other points too.
Personally, to me, the right of way setback is probably the smallest of the issues. That's just me, because generally the reason they want some of that is bigger highway, more room, traffic, you know, all kinds of things like that. Looking down over the bank, I doubt they'll be putting a road through there. So like, that seems probably to be the least of the obstacles, except for myself, even though it's, not prohibited completely, it's a concern of mine.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Egerling? Anybody?
Oh, Dan, were you saying if the board would approve this variance, that Mark can still deny that?
Yeah, and then the thing is, these different departments are in kind of different lanes. In terms, the county engineer's official policy is, you have to go to their office for a work and right of way permit to even touch that right of way. And typically, when you're on the county, if somebody ever tries to fill a ditch or put a culvert in and they non-compliant, go secondary roads come and scoop it out and return it back to the integrity of what the road has been. The policy is 10 acres or more, get you a second driveway. If you're under the 10 acres, you can't get a second driveway under Mark's policy. Mark works with the supervisors even when it comes to the work and right of way permits. And so it's a very serious matter in terms of getting extra access to the road, because Mark has to calculate site distance and he has to look at the safety area of the neighborhoods, et cetera, on the road system. And so the 10 acres is usually factored in county-wide there. But Mark would be a different lane in a different scenario across the board. There's different properties out where you can, you know, get a permit, meet the setbacks and everything and still put your structure in. But he would technically have to find a way to access it from his existing driveway, basically. If that means reconfiguring the property to an extent, removing some trees or some type of vegetation to directly access that. So it's kind of the perfect storm of the scenarios.
Access to the structure, though, not necessarily the structure itself.
Well, this is a scenario of asking for another driveway to access the structure. And so,
Which is a part of our wheelhouse right now.
which is not so much part of the wheelhouse, but then he would have to, you know, come up with a scenario. He has access to the property. How is he going to access that? Even though if he can meet the setbacks.
Worst case scenario, just say they pull this driveway on you, will you still be able to access your building the way?
Having a current type of access over there. Not ideal, but.
And then did I see in
So
Mark's,
here's where those black X's are. Every one of them has two entrances. Either A, land on B, same basic lot sizes, not 10 acres. None of them are. I mean, this is not.
Similar scenario like this, that don't mean nothing.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
They want to know the names that they go on hold their driveways. But it's serious that. They wanted names and addresses. But yeah, that, like you say,
But yeah,
you could always still go home.
and then you'd be responsible for damages to that then? Because I saw that Mark made a comment about damages to the curb and the gutter and his.
Yeah, I would have to, I cannot speak for him. I would have to defer. It would have to be between him and Mark directly. But my understanding is that Mark has I'm not so much sure how he handles concrete, but I do know that he replaces, he will remove driveways and he will restore it back. They'll get a notice basically and they'll restore it back, because when you affect county right of way, it's affecting, I mean, you're cutting into the public curb basically. And so that's where you have to go through the permitting process to ensure that the engineer, was likely as well as the supervisors under working right-of-way permits, see that it's a compliant situation from that regard.
No, this probably isn't feasible, it makes sense, but would it be possible if I know you just probably put your cars in the day where your house is, and the other is to get the upper half there. I was saying that if that main driveway could be moved up where he's proposing, then it could.
Trade driveways.
That's just a mile.
That would definitely.
Rather than trying.
You gotta think outside the box.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And kind of going back to the whole variance situation, the kind of the root definition as you're looking at it in terms of the criteria, and as well as a practical difficulty or a hardship, a lot of times a financial hardship that is not a consequence of the actions of the property owner, basically is kind of what's rooted in there. And so kind of looking at all the there's different considerations across the board that make the neighborhood and various aspects that have been put into the report.
I know what it says here, we're just basically looking at the setback, is all we're getting asked to review right now.
Yeah, it comes down to, he was unable to get a secure building permit because he wanted to build it closer to the setback. Staff can't approve building permit for something closer to the right-of-way line. Therefore, he applied for a variance, stated his reasons on why he would prefer for it to be at that location. Then, of course, when the research starts, then we discover the driveway, we discover the line, we discover those scenarios that are definitely part of the case.
Do you have any more to add or any other questions for him? Or do we have any other comments from the public? We did have one more. You can go ahead and come forward. Thank you.
My name is Carol and I live at 8 Rose Lane, across from 8 Rose Lane. And thank you for allowing me to address you during this hearing. I'd like to first state that I am against the approval of this request for variance. I have lived on Rose Lane since January 1996. My acreage is my little piece of heaven on earth, has been for the past 26 years. The reasons that I am against this variance is one of the joys of living outside the city limits is being away from huge buildings, especially ones that resemble an industrial area, which I think this building could possibly look like. This building will be massive, 2.5 stories tall, which is taller than Mr. Ingerman's house. It is my understanding that he wants to utilize this building for storage. He has a fifth wheel camper parked on his lot. This camper's typical height runs from 12 feet 4 inches to 13 feet 4 inches. With his fifth wheel parked in the yard, I can imagine how tall this building will be, some 12 feet taller than his fifth wheel camper. As tall as a tree. I'm unsure why this storage building needs to be so large. This building will be positioned right in front of my driveway. I would feel better about the whole situation if the building were within the zoning district dimensional standards currently in place. This building will hopefully be hidden by trees that are currently on the property. The square footage of this building will be 2,352 square feet. The house on the property is 2,660 square feet above grade. So it is easy to imagine the building the size of his house next to the house. But the storage building will also be a half a story taller than his 2-story home. This summer, surveyors were surveying the property to the north of Rose Lane, and the surveyor informed me that the individual that purchased the 65 acres to the north planned to section the parcel off into individual acreages and sell them for development of housing. I asked the surveyor if they would build a new road, and he stated that they would most likely use Rose Lane as an access to this new development. If/when this occurs, it could be a possibility that Rose Lane will be widened to accommodate traffic and possible parking, which would mean Mr. Ingerling's building would be encroaching toward the street even more if his adjustment is granted. I have spoken about the size of this building. I think it will be a monstrosity. I also feel that it will reduce the value of my house and my property. Approval of this variance request will most likely have the greatest effect on my property value since it will be right across the street from my property and my driveway. If this variance is approved for Mr. Ingerling, this could set a precedent for others who may try to follow suit in the future. Zoning regulations and laws are in place for a reason, and we should adhere to them strictly regarding this request. I understand that many of the homes on Rose Lane are not 75 feet from the right of way. This is not a valid reason to build a large building that is even with your house. I cannot think of a substantial reason for this building to be in line with his house, other than it is a matter of convenience for him, financially or otherwise, which is not a reasonable excuse for not following the current zoning laws. I personally have put a storage box, truck box on my property, and I actually placed it in the very far corner of my backyard. And is it an inconvenience for me because my backyard is a solid slope down to a field? Yes, it's an inconvenience, but out of respect for my neighbors, the people driving by my house, I put it down in the corner. And I just drive on it. I have to go down there. I could possibly be more understanding and compassionate regarding this request if Mr. Ingerling was landlocked and had no other options other than to reduce the size of his storage building. But Mr. Ingerling is not landlocked. He has a whole acre of land that he does nothing with, including mowing or tree removal. This acre just sits there. If he were to build in this area, it would be downhill, away from sight for the most part, but due to its size, I'm sure it's still invisible from the road. I can't understand why he most likely doesn't build on this acre that he does not maintain. It is probably because it would be more expensive to provide electric to the building, possibly water, which I'm sure would be greater financial hardship. But neighbors should not have to endure any type of hardship because something is cheaper for your neighbor. I am sure it would be much easier for him to park this 50 acre storage building if the building were closer to the road. Neighbors should also not have to worry about the property values reducing or plummeting because your neighbor wants to place his enormous storage building closer to the right of way. Please take into consideration all the issues that I have brought up, and I thank you so much for your time. Do you have any questions of me? Thank you.
Yes.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Anybody online? Anybody online? I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second it.
Motion by Ashley and a second by Pam to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, public hearing is now closed.
Your plans to start the building pretty soon.
Yes, sir.
I guess one question I did have, the building and height, when we were talking 25 feet, is that peak height? That's not. Yep. So sidewall height, is that,
The site of the building.
99 foot high building. I need a 15 or 16. But I sign all, get a bit of the. That's the thing, it's not any higher than my house. Got my 2-story house. Oh, well, I think it was,
That accessory structure to this, to the back, what are the dimensions and what's the construction of it? That's a concrete building, concrete slab. Your construction, you know.
how many slab, I don't know here. The right.
Is it built at the same time as your home or is it?
I don't know. About 24. Square.
So that was built in maybe 1983 then, potentially.
The accessory building or the house?
It looks like it's a accessory building, storage shed, 1983.
Go back to that picture of the residences. Where the actual driveways work out of street view. So the home in question, building would be across from that, correct?
Right here.
What that is.
Yes, that's what it looks like. And again, I'll draw that 75 to, this is, it would be compliant past that line. But the request is like this.
The ground where, east of where you're gonna put the building, does that slope down quite a bit? But on the ground.
It's pretty long, the building is going to be a lot of filter.
Farther east, it's.
Here's kind of some elevation.
There'd be a lot of green, there'd be a lot of green.
Now, the homeowner, it appears that, you know, his building would be across from your driveway, although your house is more north. The trees, you know, that would be next to his building, are those be higher than the building? I mean, would the building essentially be blocked from your direct view of the house, or what was your concern there, just that it was across from your driveway?
Yeah, that's from the reference. And I understand it'd be difficult to do that as trees.
Need to deliberate on possible motions or just
Yeah, this is kind of administrative time.
our discussion.
To continue to ask questions or.
You guys have any other questions you haven't addressed?
A lot of concerns, but
Most of the concerns are one's risk that he is going to have to worry about. I mean, as far as me looking at the whole situation, I would be inclined to say that we could probably grant it, but he's going to have to go through what it takes to make sure he's compliant with the DOT and also get the map of the leach beds and all those types of things. So I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done, but I think for our part, I would be inclined to approve the variance just because with if the stipulations were taken care of.
That fit into part as number one, as far as the condition or.
So the question is about conditions. Yeah, those kind of conditions are kind of referenced there in the staff report.
On page 4, or possible motion.
And to reiterate, to expand on your question, I just want to read.
don't know.
To read a part of the variance scenario.
I'm mildly curious as if the time of transfer, septic tank inspection that was done, would be adequate for a page or.
Okay, I'm just gonna read here a portion of where it says conditional approval of variances. The Board of Adjustment may, as a condition related to approval of a variance, impose restrictions and safeguards upon the property and the variance granted if it determines the restrictions to be necessary to minimize adverse effects on other property or the public interest. Such conditions shall be set forth in the resolution of the Board Adjustment granting the variance. Failure to comply with any conditions imposed on a variance approval is a violation of this title and in this ordinance. So there is the authority to attach on the various conditions as a pathway forward to try to meet the criteria. So you have your list of criteria and your conditions are meant to try to ensure that the criteria could possibly be met. And so the question is, it's just kind of looking at where you feel something could fit if necessary. That's.
So would it be best to say, I would move to approve the variance if all conditions of septic tank and the driveway be resolved?
It would be definitely up to the board on what the board considers as reasonable in terms of meeting the criteria. And one of the criteria for sure, like what District Health had, was you need to know where the leach is, you need to know where the septic is, and you got to ensure that where you're going to put the structure is where you're going to put it on paper.
Combined, than what is here. Yeah, I guess myself, I
So
would.
that, is that motion?
It's reasonable to put, the motion would have to probably lay out some conditions that you're gonna put conditions in.
I wouldn't be comfortable recommending it with anything less than what your possible motion was. I mean, I guess I'm almost feeling like I should almost be a little bit more restrictive, but I guess I don't have that really solid at that. At least your recommendations, at time of transfer, accuracy on that statement.
And everybody's probably seen the resolution at one point in time. It's basically opens up what the variance is about, whereas this lead up to the reasons why something is instituted and executing what a possible condition would be. So then condition 1, condition 2, condition 3, depending on what they are.
That's where your language bills will come in.
Pass on that one.
Just where you go, something like this, with your driveways.
Yeah, that would almost have to be a fix prior to, that
Yeah,
would have to be.
Would that be part of the conditions?
That would have to be
Or
addressed.
can we not?
We do have the language, and I think you've imposed it a few times where you say, and other, well, when we talk about other levels of government and other meeting the requirements of that, that has definitely been a part of it. It depends directly on, you're looking at public safety and, you know, all those different aspects of what those conditions are. So it'd have to be rooted into that. So recognizing complying with regulations is an essential part of enforcing ordinances.
How high did you say the sidewalls were in this building? 16?
That's rough. I was doing the math and I had to figure 20.
What?
That's a fairly steep rough. I had to math figure the sidewalls and work about pitch that'd be a 20-foot sidewall. But it's, you said it's 16.
That'd be a 612.
You can see by that, you know, you measure truck there.
Say that again. I mean, it depends on where you're at in the house. Like if you're on that south part of the house and in the front yard, you're still gonna be the visual destruction or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just tough. I think I'm more concerned about all the other areas that are out of compliance and, I mean, I appreciate the position. However, I don't know that that's the strongest argument for me. It's just.
You're talking about a 14-foot high door in there. They need a couple foot from over.
But for a 16-foot sidewall. But, you know, that's neither here nor there, but I guess. Yes, what would Mark has already said that he wasn't in favor of approving this. But if it was approved, what would his response be as in access to the property? You can't really deny access off the road, just deny the driveway, correct?
Well, again, I gotta be careful not speaking for him, but
exactly.
access is off of the driveway. Technically, my understanding is you'd have to find a way to access from the actual driveway itself. I don't think anywhere across the board we would go in and endorse hopping curbs. So
No.
it just,
Which leads to, if we were to grant it, build the building, the county engineer may come back and be fairly rigid on. I don't know how they would enforce it. I mean, like you say, you need to open the door up for a problem.
Well, there's always the possibility, again, I can't speak for him, but there's always a possibility to restore the curb. Which,
We put it back to,
like, put it back to where it was.
that sounds like that's where Mark was going with it, but the curb was back in there. He has a building there. Is there any prohibition? Yeah, that doesn't sound like the right word. Is there
That sounds
any-
like along with something else.
Is there
but-
anything to prohibit still back accessing that driveway?
That, I couldn't speak to that clear enough.
Yeah.
It just kind of, it does come down to that a person in an ideal world, if they meet the setback, you know, put up any type of structure, shed, as long as it meets the setback. So these are just kind of added on challenges.
That probably don't concern us though.
The secondary roads department, typically, we do have to defer to them on that. We look out in the farm community and everything, when there's different scenarios, they, depending on the size of the parcel, et cetera, or just a farmer having a, non-farmer having a homestead out there, they're in the same scenario. Mark's only gonna give them the one part of it. That's county policy, so it comes down to, you gotta figure out how you're gonna access that on your own. It's kind of the scenario, which makes it challenging, because you can meet a setback, you just might not be able to access your building. Could be problematic.
Cross that up there behind Lowe's, where the guy put a building up and his only overhead door was from the neighbor's property. And you could not access his building unless the neighbors gave him permission, but there's still a right of way. There wasn't enough. It was like a 3 feet between the door and the property line. Yeah, we had to bail on that one. That was a call-in meeting last year. So precedent's kind of been set about denial.
I would reference again what was said in the staff report too, is we did say if there's any consideration to kind of reconfigure or remove the existing structure, there would be possibilities to move the setback. It's just, there is.
Then you wouldn't have to go
setback.
to this one, it says, oh,
Right. So is that an option to submit a secondary application so that it's more in compliance and addressing some of the concerns that have been raised here tonight? In the event that you want to put up a secondary structure to house your camper and your pickup or whatever.
So the only way that I see that I can read that requirement would be to eliminate that shelter. To build a building directly in front of Carol's property. But it would be 75 feet back, but it'd be right in front of her property. So that's, I mean, then I also have to go, can't go too far north because of the leach field. That's on the other side of that shelter. That's why when I put that thing right in the thing, far from the leach field, far from the septic tank.
but
And
you
it
were,
doesn't affect the drainage of the property in any way, shape, or form. Blocking her and blocking the neighbor over here.
but if you were to go through that process, you would have been good at this.
I would have to wrap it, I would say $1,000. Trying to get this building in the correct position, correct space on my property.
Because that would just be a building permit application, and the right of way sets out that.
If you can find a way to meet the 75 feet and not interfere with his leach field or his septic tank,
Or the line.
or the line could be a bonus factor, meet the 75, then it would likely be a building permit.
And what's that shelter structure that you referenced? Like, what is, I'm just curious. What is the purpose of it? It's storage. That piece right there?
Around farming stuff.
And in the event that you had your shed to the size that you wanted, that essentially could serve as storage for that stuff as well. Maybe. Right, yeah, no, I'm just trying, like we said, sometimes we have to think outside the box to figure out a solution that's meets the needs, because with the additional concerns, I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to approve.
Yeah, there's so many things factoring in. It's not just one.
I don't think we get to take into consideration everybody else's house. I get that that's your point, that's what you're stuck on, but we don't consider what everybody else is doing. And nor would you probably want us to consider what other people have done if it's in violation of other ordinances, right? Like that does not make right.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't. And there's no way to add on, like, that shed that is the gardening shed, I'm just gonna use, that's like a smaller, there's no way to like add on to that. Well, I mean, just in, I would make a motion to deny the request for variance. I just can't come to a place where I would feel solid in approving it, so that's where I'm at.
With the other options. Terrible expense that reduce, so down over.
Yep. And the-
So you had made, you want.
I made a motion,
Okay.
yes,
You repeat motion again, I mean,
to deny the request.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the request as presented. Do we have, is there any further discussion? Do we have a second?
You would have a second to
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, so do we have a second?
Just kind of.
Yeah.
I'm just
You
so.
don't have a second.
Mhm.
I'm going to deny if we don't have a second.
You need a second to do
The harm. The lesser of the evils is probably. What's the little structure right behind the red line? That
The
there,
what, oh, the trampoline,
that term.
or.
Okay, it's not a structure. Okay.
So if we don't have a second on that motion, do we open it back up for further discussion?
without a second,
It's not a live motion.
I guess. Do you guys have something other in mind and just,
No, I'm just on the fence with that.
so do you have any stipulations that you have in mind if we didn't just have a flat out motion to deny or?
we already got the table this, or would we be down on
We
the
would, I
table?
mean, what information would we still go gather? I mean, usually when you table something, you're looking for more information.
Yeah, that's what I
I
need.
think we,
I get more
I think we
from-
have the information.
I think it calls, if that case, I want to read the
trailers, campers is pretty hard.
It's
Put that down.
Yeah, it basically kind of comes down to the options for the Board of Adjustment are as a condition. I mean, it can go to a condition, it can go to an approval of the variance, impose restrictions and safeguards upon the property and the variance granted if it determines the restrictions to be necessary to minimize adverse effects on other property or the public interest. Such conditions shall be set forth in a resolution. Failure to comply, of course, would be imposed on the variance approval as a violation of the ordinance. It's how it speaks to the approval procedure.
As far as tabling anything, I mean, is there something we'd want to establish further through the, the investigation of the septic lines specifically or anything like that? I mean, is that where you were at, Bob, where you were wondering?
Yeah, I guess there's enough other options available to make it a little bit more conducive for the space available versus the space required. I guess, trying to think of how to word it. I'm kind of inclined to give a second, that isn't a second, I'm inclined to on the, with making some adjustments. The building size, I'm not concerned about the height, but a 56 by 48 building is more than what's needed to facilitate what the primary needs to put the camper as a primary goal. But adjusting the size and adjusting the location might make it a little.
I can get behind it.
I may be able to get a little bit more behind it. Is that fair to say?
I think I would probably recommend if I simply read off what the requirements are. So with the conditions, and I think it might help along. In order to grant a variance, the Board of Adjustment must determine that granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest or the general intent or the purpose of this ordinance. Of this title, in that if adversely impacts neighborhood properties, substantially increases congestion of people, buildings, or traffic, endangers public health or safety, overburdens public facilities or services, or impairs the enjoyment, use of, or value of nearby property. Then it says, granting the variance is necessary to ensure that the owner does not suffer an economic hardship. The owner does not suffer an economic hardship. Then it says, note, increased financial return or reduced cost to the applicant are not adequate cause for finding of a hardship. A finding of economic hardship must be based on the following. The property cannot yield a reasonable return if used in compliance with the requirements of this title.
That's probably it.
The property has unique physical constraints that result in its inability to be used in compliance with the requirements of this title. And the hardship is not a result of the actions by the owner. Then it goes on to say, no variance shall be granted which would permit the establishment of a use within a given district, which is prohibited therein. No variance shall be granted which is so commonly recurring that it is a de facto amendment of this ordinance. No variance shall be granted that is more than the minimum relief needed. No variance shall be granted that is more than the minimum relief needed. And then it says, no variance shall be granted. Okay, this one does not apply to the provision provisions of 5.03 relative to floodplain management. So I will say that we all know that shall is the must.
Based on what I interpret, you read back to us on that. Because financial hardship is not considered. Financially, it could be changed where it would be the setback.
Could you kind of clarify that?
One of the purposes for denial be the financial hardship. It's not, you can't consider that. As it's going to be a financial hardship, we have to approve it. That this doesn't fall into that category, does it?
The typical categories is the practical difficulty or the financial hardship. And I'm going to go ahead and read this again because I think it kind of engages what you said. Granting the variance is necessary to assure that the owner does not suffer an economic hardship. It's sort of, he must put this here to be, not have a hardship. Note, increased financial return or reduced cost to the applicant are not adequate cause for finding the hardship. A finding of economic hardship must be based on the following. The property cannot yield a reasonable return if used in compliance with the requirements of this title. Must it be built here? Kind of is kind of the property has unique physical constraints. This is the other one that result in its inability to be used in compliance with the requirements of this title or ordinance. The hardship is not a result of the actions by the owner.
Unique physical land grade is not so much that it can't be overcome. So we run across where buildings were right up against steep bank.
Yeah.
Not much you can do about that. You're pretty much just, you can't do anything about that. Or setbacks. But in this case here, the setback, he's restricted by doing it because there's an existing building there and there's a little bit of grade.
And also the location of the leach pad and the,
But there is a place where the existing building is at. It would encroach onto that. It couldn't be done. I guess I feel that there are options. Other options than building it right where it's at, the exact structure where it's at, but then putting the other end of it, putting it there. You're still gonna have the driveway issue, septic tank issues, the leach line issue is one for me, but having the IBM and their requirements would be adequate. Correct.
Well, they're where they have teeth is leach and septic tank. And so their recommendation generally is a robust site plan that marks all the locations on the site, in particular leach and septic. And where can the structure be placed so that it's 10 feet at least off of that? So it kind of comes down to, here's the room on the line. So there's two lines you're basically looking at. The applicant is requesting to build no closer than the house. So this is the line that is being requested up to that point. This other line is where he could build. He could build as long as he clarifies, there's a few considerations here: grading and vegetation removal, which was cited there in the packet. The removal of the building, or if there's some grading, if it could go up here more. The key to county setbacks is the way the language is written. An accessory structure cannot be in front of the house unless it is double the setback. So that's kind of the key there. There's no way to get double the setback here where you have 75 times 2. He's requesting to build all of the house closer to the road. There's a scenario here that even if he was behind the house a little bit, he's still encroaching in the required 75-foot setback. Therefore, that's the premise of this asking the Board of Adjustment to the variance request to place the structure there. So the question is, typically, is there any other location on this property where this could legitimately come in and get a building permit and be approved? And there could be a possibility if grading and vegetation removal were considered along with siting the well, or the well would be part of that too, but the well's not in this scenario, but the septic and the leach field. So we own the septic, leach field, and possible elevation and tree removal. But if there's a question of other locations on this property that a building permit could be issued, then that's something too. And that's where I got the phrasing in there about the removal of building or vegetation in other areas.
So Don, under where it says like 42.56 or whatever, is that the camper? There's that like white strip.
Yeah, the camper was sitting there.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to be right.
That's the camper right there.
Okay. I was just making sure that wasn't like another structure or something that wasn't.
Well,
But as long as you're behind or on the 75 foot, it could go anywhere on this line, depending on if there's no obstructions.
yeah,
You know,
it's topographically, there's a lot of terrain there.
Yeah, if you go back and look at that one, and that gives you the elevations again, and see the kind of a lot going on there too.
We were on the damn hospital. Take that on that line.
That would have to be satisfactory to Dave and I. They would be the ones that would sign off on the kind of transfer survey.
Yeah, technically to issue a building permit, we ask Siouxland District, we send it over to Siouxland District Health basically, so they know where the wells and septics are. Usually when folks are building a house, whatever, then that's all considered in. But we just simply don't want folks to encroach on leaches and septic tanks per se. And going into our ordinance, I cited 4.06. And our ordinance kind of falls along the lines of what they dealt with in chapter 69, where it says, there shall be sufficient ground area unoccupied by structures or paving to allow proper system of sewage disposals and or water supply conforming with applicable standards and requirements of the county and state regulations, regardless of other provisions of this ordinance. Site plans accompanying building permit application shall show the proposed sewage disposal systems and water supply. So we always have to include that stuff on building.
Can I stop you right there? Because like this building then would be going over the water supply line to the leach field.
That would be, and when I asked Siouxland District Health for
Not specific.
clarification on that.
Talks about the tank, the leach field.
Then it says, let me find where it was at. All such proposed systems shall be subject to approval of the appropriate health agencies prior to issuance of a building permit. The scenario here is where it says coverage of any part of a septic tank, specific to tank, or leach field, specific to leach field, by a building or hard surface shall not be permitted.
It doesn't address.
It doesn't address the line.
Is this reasonable to hold or to see where we're set? Hold. Not hold, but just hold the board.
Mhm.
So my motion to deny is still on the table.
It's still waiting a second.
But that's where I'm still.
And I had a motion to not second.
Okay, there's two without
So-
a second.
There's
Yeah,
two
you did-
motions on the table.
To approve with the conditions.
I said my opinion was that we approve it with conditions that they be met prior to allowing the building to be built.
Still on the fence.
That was kind of my, I was kind of similar with you, if certain conditions could be met, there's a possibility of approval.
You on that way?
Pretty much against it now, I think. But I could waffle.
Thinking that you'd like to see it go through following all of the.
If certain conditions could be met, that would be reasonable, because I'm an opponent, you own your piece of ground, you want to be able to do something with it, I don't want to be a hindrance to somebody that wants to, improve their property and enjoy it, but,
Typically, the stance I take on
yep.
septic tank, mine, even though it's not a greater deal type of thing for the county, bothers me for the septic line. Because, I guess I've dealt with people having a problem with their line. It's under a building, but then he's willing to take that risk. So,
What floats in the back of my mind is I think I've heard of this being done before, where something has been built over the line, I don't think it's the first time it would happen, but.
typically, if it's sequentially done, and it's usually a cast iron line, you're building a building over a sewer line. Very typically cast iron, but this was done ahead of time. It is just a leach line. The probability of anything damage happening to it. Pretty slim.
Mhm.
Muddy the water a little bit more, and just say, I will second the motion with the conditions being met. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So we had a motion from Pam to approve with which conditions then
Conditions that the driveway issue be resolved with the DOT and that the condition that.
Hey, that's okay.
Like I said, just
There's not a whole lot we can do about the leach line. And if he's willing to take the risk, but he would have to comply with getting the health department, what they are requiring as far as being 10 foot from the leach bed and.
all the setbacks
all
from
the
the
setbacks,
facilities.
Right, that all of the requirements would have to be met.
I would almost ask to consider recommending moving the leach line, not requiring. But relocate.
The clean water line.
Yeah, yeah, the leach line. Now, you know, and I would say that, yeah, you gotta do that. I'm not on board. I'm just saying that be a wise decision to do that. Would be adding costs to it. Building over it. But I don't know if that be recommendations really don't need to be in there.
It can be.
I just think it would be good to have that concern stated, that we at least raised that concern and we did.
Acknowledge that there is a concern there.
Yeah, acknowledge that we do have a concern and a reservation about approving it, knowing that it's
That
going over
would
that.
probably add a little credence to the idea that if something did happen, it's accepting 100% responsibility. We knew that that was potential.
The other recommendation talked about a robust site plan or a professionally certified site plan.
That would meet Department of Health's.
Yeah, but to go even a step further, to acknowledge where the property line is, the setbacks, and to ensure that it matches up with the house. So basically a professionally stamped site plan, basically for professional.
What considers professional, like Terry's septic system, we did the first one.
Well, those who do the time of transfer, the health department, they do have inspectors that can go out and actually identify the leach field. Possibly even surveyors of the nature can lay that out. But in an instance with these many scenarios there, it'd be imperative to have a direct site plan where it mathematically can show that the assets of the property are safe and danger.
So we do have a motion by Pam and a second by Bob to approve with these conditions that I don't think I will be able to recite at the
That's why I
moment.
said that's where.
That's
the
why-
language feels good.
Yeah. Recording
Where
and
we're going with this. You got any, you can ask for comments. Do you have any comment on it?
Why can't you put it in this?
South side. Do you have a,
Downhill side.
Well, that's flat.
Steep grade there. Trying to picture when we were looking at that.
It's 2 foot intervals.
Those are 2 foot.
Yeah.
increments.
Yep. So this is actually, that blue line's hard to see, but it's right there.
to get it back, camper back down in there.
I guess to address the business at hand, we do have a motion and a second to approve with these conditions. Is there,
Well, the conditions are gonna have to be enumerated,
okay,
laid out.
okay. Do I need to restate them or do we want to, does anybody want to add to any conditions or?
We have so far.
Pam has mentioned in her the resolution of the driveway, we had a recommendation come up of moving the leach line and
Suggesting it.
suggestion.
In addition to what you had prepared in the staff possible.
As site plan scenario that I had referenced. So kind of starting with the ones I brought up are kind of a basis, I guess. Probably I would suggest restating it. the motion.
You want me to restate it?
Yeah, if
Okay.
possible, it depends on the withdrawing it or restating it. It just depends on how you do that.
I would withdraw the motion and restate it to include, I would have moved for the approval of the variance, having met all the required kind of variant, what are we going to call them?
Conditions.
The conditions that would include the meeting the DOT's requirements for the driveway, secondary roads, requirements for the driveway. And second, that they also have a certified map of the property that would include exact locations of anything to do with the leach bed, the leach lines, the et cetera.
Could a person put on driveway / access? Because county engineer, he might take the driveway out, but he might have a
Leave it.
condition on access. Would that be?
So he's saying,
I guess,
would the secondary roads allow them, if the driveway was taken out, to still back in?
Like jumping the curb or whatever.
Well, I mean, yeah,
I would have to identify that.
I'll have to clarify that. And that we also put a recommendation, let's see, that what you said,
About exploring the rerouting of the clean water line.
that we recommend the rerouting of the each line. But not, I mean, we can't require it, but just a recommendation. Is that big enough?
I believe so. It's got the. Yeah, that would empower, the site plan would empower us at the building permit level to ask for deciding the specific distances. It's got to be, we've got some other regulations with his building there. He's got to be 10 feet away from that. So we need to know how far from the leach, how far from the septic, how far from the property lines, et cetera. So all those things are in.
that information has yet to be gathered.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is anybody can kind of put together a site plan. I'm gonna put it here, I'm gonna put it here, but in this instance, we're gonna recommend a professionally done site plan that lays it out.
Proper wording for that has to be recited to you, or can you, we acknowledge that that's what we want, and you can put that proper wording in there.
Yeah, as long as you reference
Yes, I think
a professional site plan by a certified or somebody who's certified with qualifications. And of course, something where the property owners acknowledge and accept all the risks associated with and liabilities with the construction placement over the septic lines. Because if there is a burst and the items get loose in the soils and things,
There are issues. That's what would happen.
And again, I would always say when we do a variance to have language in there that ensures that the accessory storage shed should not be closer to the front lot line than the front edge of the house. And so it establishes that setback that they have requested.
The application for the conditional use has that
Variance.
in there.
So then you would have to, if you agree, we'd have to second that new motion. I withdrew the old one.
We do have that is a second by Bob. Okay. I guess, ready to call for a vote?
You're in the discussion stage still.
Okay.
Close the hearing. No,
The discussion of the motion until Sunday.
Okay, is there any further discussion on it?
With that, I withdraw my motion first. And then we can move to a vote.
Move to a vote to approve Pam's motion as seconded by Bob. Well,
I would ask to clarify or reading, just for the record, what the provisions are.
So,
Working on over there.
No. Pages in.
so Pam Clark restated the motion up for the approval of the variance, having all conditions met, which are as followed. Meet secondary roads requirements for driveway access conditions. So their secondary roads is, you'll have to work with secondary roads to meet those conditions. A certified professional show exact location of property lines, leash lines, and other things existing on the property. Let's see, the owner must meet setback requirement from the certified report. Property owner accepts of responsibility for the placement over septic line and any damage that may occur. Ensure shed is not in front of the house. Do we need to change any of that or add anything?
Probably, the liability part to reference shall not hold the county responsible.
If you're agree with that.
Yes, I agree with.
any further discussion, the motion clarified.
Okay, the recommendations.
The recommendation for consideration to reroute.
Okay.
Usually the catch-all one that you've used in the past with your, excuse me. One of the catch-alls that you put in there in the past is, that it meets the requirements of all associated agencies, so that it just kind of encompasses everything, so. Consider something like that.
Okay.
That.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, that, what he said.
And the compliance.
Refer to video.
This is just sort of, funneling through with, so you mentioned the driveway, the certified map, or the professionally done site plan, the recommendation, or the catch-all, all the different agencies. And, again, the setbacks, I would have something in there possibly about not any closer than the house, front end of the house.
Okay, building not to exceed past the front of the house.
I believe so. I know we're overlapping.
Definitely. And for the most part, not part of this at all, but that can be avoided if the building is located in a different spot. To meet the just setback and not this big setback.
It's back further. I probably suggest reading it off one more time just so it's consistent.
Okay,
With
One
the
more,
following
please.
conditions, there's a motion to approve the variance. First is to meet secondary road requirement for driveway access. Conditions will be determined by secondary roads. Right.
To meet secondary roads as requirements and policies or something.
A certified professional will need to complete,
certified site plan.
yes,
Provide a site plan from a certified professional.
to show exact location of it's like leach field, leash lines, any,
All facilities, structures.
yeah, any structures and setbacks
existing buildings. Okay. The recommendation to reroute leach line. Another is to meet the setback requirements from the certified report. And according to the county ordinances.
Yeah.
Okay. Zoning. Okay, property owner will accept responsibility for placement over septic line and shall not hold the county responsible for damage, any possible damage. Ensure shed is not any closer to the front of the house. And meet all regulations by other agencies.
So I think that factors in the well, or excuse me, the septic and the leach field.
What we were kind of concerned with.
Yeah.
Okay, are you comfortable with that submission? For the record?
With the board on that.
Okay, are you guys comfortable with that now then? Okay,
Restrictive, but it's necessary.
at that time then I will call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. Guess we are moving on now to information and discussion. Can we entertain a little reset, restroom reset?
Yes,
Is that okay?
absolutely.
Okay,
That's the call of the board.
okay. 5-minute recess? Okay.
Sure.
Well, supposed to be at another meeting, but I guess I missed that.
We are recording.
Okay.
They have to go for overtime, right?
Yeah. Difficult ones to get through. One of the more
Yeah.
difficult ones to get through.
And then what we discuss.
Yeah. Well. Either in that
Okay.
building. That's, I don't know. No, but that's gonna be a pretty good size.
He's shaking his head.
I need to, because I am tired, crashing hard.
We'll resume our meeting here in one more minute. Okay, shall we resume the meeting?
Trying to see if everybody's here. Are we at the 10-minute mark?
We are. Okay, Dan, I guess I will ask you to continue on with our information and discussion.
Sure, absolutely. We do have an information discussion item here. The item is zoning requirements concerning the permitting of hazardous liquid pipelines, including the conditional use requirements in the zoning ordinance and possible ordinances or ordinance amendments. The backup material in your packets lists a few options about hazardous pipelines. The zoning land use summary table vests the zoning commission with review authority and the board of adjustment with the conditional use permit granting or denial authority of the pipelines, hazardous pipelines. And kind of for clarification, there's been some discussion about the existing infrastructure within the ordinance or whether there would be a need to look at a different ordinance or a change to the zoning ordinance to address pipelines. Or a third option would be a standalone ordinance as was looked at with the wind in the past, where a permitting authority would be shifted to the supervisors versus the zoning commission board of adjustment. For some background on this scenario here, pipelines are a zoning ordinance issue. They've been historically since the 2008. And when I went back and looked, there's been a couple instances on smaller scale pipelines where the zoning commission board of adjustment likely looked at particular areas of property on whether how a pipeline fits within the community. And so we've been tasked by the supervisors. There's been a few public meetings here and there where we've been delivering, some sample ordinances and staff, myself, county engineer, the county attorney's office, assistant county attorney, have kind of looked at some options as it pertains to pipelines and zoning. And your packets here simply reiterate the conditional use procedures. And I know that the boards have done numerous conditional uses across the board through the years when it comes to zoning issues that are very generalized. And so when these items are brought before the zoning commission and the board of adjustment, it's staff's job to go in and look really carefully at all the different challenges when we notice different agencies, we notice different landowners as a whole, and we bring the criteria to the zoning commission and the board of adjustment to make a decision that is rooted in the criteria. This first handout that was provided to you is something you're all very familiar with, and that is the 6 criteria and the 2 other considerations for how a specific project would fit the immediate area for a community. And as the current language sits, hazardous pipelines fall under this category. However, the different challenge that that the county and other local communities are involved with is the role of the Iowa Utilities Board and how that they have some authority a bit over zoning and local control. So there's some questions on whether zoning could go and give the thumbs up or the thumbs down, and whether eminent domain or various other issues could in effect still impact the pipeline scenario. And going through each of these criteria, a pipeline and the corridor where something would be evaluated would have to be evaluated as a whole. For instance, many of the conditional use permits that have been looked at by the zoning commission, board of adjustment, have been very specific to this area, this area, this area. And what happens is the homework task for any potential pipeline permit is to study the entire area in which something is permitted. So therefore, a conditional use permit is submitted to the zoning commission, board of adjustment. This would be a very big task of looking at the entire corridor where something fits and how it interacts with everything, including that respective criteria that you're very used to looking at. So if a permit application hit tomorrow, then it would be the normal standard criteria for review and to objectively look at as a whole what the big picture is, but with consideration of understanding what the Iowa Utilities Board does. Tonight, earlier, you looked at variances, you looked at conditions. The zoning ordinance looks at the review, the zoning commission looks at it through a robust review. Staff does make a recommendation. Then that report gets sent over where the public hearings, the business is conducted at the zoning commission level, or excuse me, the board of adjustment level where the official public hearing is, and the decision makers are inside of the board of adjustment. And with that said, any conditions and everything has to be directly rooted into what those criteria are, if there is any need to look at the concept and see if there's any conditions that would be necessary. So I'm just simply repeating to you what the normal order is if a permit were to come through.
Dan, I have a question.
Yes.
If any member of the Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning had because I heard you say objective, and so like an unbiased opinion when we're considering these ordinance or a conditional use. So if there was like on record, like one of those members having like a personal opinion, either in favor or against, would they have to then like recuse themselves from voting on this matter?
Typically, staff doesn't impose conditions on how members of either board conduct themselves. But it's kind of the concept that Daniel read off at the very beginning. When you go through there, if you have a conversation of some sort, you have would have to report and disclose that. And so the objectivity is really essential. I know you all know that well in terms of how you would interact and conduct when something is brought forward, an objective concept. So it comes down to each and every member to look at and kind of analyze how they fit in with the scenario and report if there was any type of scenario as a whole. It's fully on the individual member to make the prudent judgment on a scenario as such, if it were to come to that. And so as a whole, as members of the zoning commission or the board of adjustment, you have a multitude of issues across the land use summary table as a whole. So it's very possible things like that could possibly happen. So it's important to be cognizant of all of those scenarios and be able to make an informed judgment on those type of proceedings. So I would have to say it's very much an individualistic matter to look at that responsibility that folks hold for that position. Your role as basically officers or representatives of the county in respective roles. So very essential to consider for sure. Going back to the land use summary table, then we've had a few options where folks have kind of referenced examples. I'll give you an example. We currently have infrastructure in this county to look at the permitting options for pipelines through the zoning commission, through the board of adjustment, through the normal procedure in order. There's been some proposals out there to maybe look at some other scenarios. There's kind of an ordinance that's been going around out of Shelby County. There's some language there. Basically, some of these counties have looked at offering additional ordinance language to support the conditional use permit process, and basically add a bit more language in there that would kind of be a part of or associate with the criteria. The concept of these different hazard liquid pipeline ordinances as a whole. We've kind of looked at it as a staff, and we've looked at actually a couple others for consideration, but kind of going through with the county attorney's office and looking at possible ordinance changes that are out there. Staff is generally seen where if you look at the existing conditional use permit application, there's concepts where we typically would recommend of the board of supervisors themselves to look at possibly passing a resolution based upon what our existing criteria is, and then empowering the zoning commission and the board of adjustment to possibly ask questions of clarification. Because our 6 criteria and our 2 considerations are very broad. They're very broad in nature, and so a lot of times when something goes to a public hearing of some sorts, members might ask questions. Most of the time, your questions are very rooted into what you're tasked to ask for. And so kind of the general concept of staff is maybe come up with a list of some further criteria for some things to look at, but that's just a general kind of aspect of how pipelines could be theoretically looked at. The third kind of option was another ordinance that was a standalone type of ordinance, which basically puts the permitting into the supervisors. But anyway, there's a few options out there for consideration of how these pipelines are. But as with any type of conditional use or any type of proposed amendment, the county as a whole will need to know what we're asking for and looking at as a whole. And there's many questions of concern across the board about how ordinances are looked at, objectively looked at, and interpreted. So I just simply wanted to bring to you that there's been some proposals out there to look at general criteria of how pipelines have been permitted. The county does have infrastructure in place as with the conditional use, but there are opportunities out there to consider amending if the county wanted to look at, areas within the ordinance that there's be possible, collection of more information. As a whole, we're looking carefully at the possibility of the recommendation of asking the supervisors for some type of resolution to empower the zoning commission or Board of Adjustment to use the current infrastructure. So that's kind of generally what I wanted you to be aware of. I'm going to be bringing this agenda item over to the zoning commission. And just for clarification, and it's important for the public to understand, the Board of Adjustment is not an ordinance amending. The zoning commission is usually one of them that either starts the process or the Board of Supervisors will direct the zoning commission to start the process. So zoning commission can come up with a proposal, say we have an identification here. And this will be brought up to their special meeting on Wednesday in general, that there's some proposals out there, but it's imperative that all boards and bodies at least understand that there's, different aspects, different proposals to the ordinance. But in the end, the interpretation and looking at criteria of the ordinance is a very major objective matter.
Pipelines have the same latitude as
That's a good question. The
I personally had issues with the ability for a cell phone company to do what they feel is best. Pipelines, they could similarly have the same latitude.
as of the question is about, as you know, I think our last tower that came to this Board of Adjustment was about a year ago. And they have Iowa Code 8C what happens is that's a classic example of where the state and the federal grab on to some of our authority. And what happens is under Iowa Code 8C, the county boards are restricted from asking a series of questions that kind of relate to environmental based conditions across the board. And so what it comes down to is when we mapped it out for you last year, we're pretty much looking at setbacks, placement of where the structure is, fall zone, the basic areas there, but otherwise there's a bit more restriction. As of right now, as it concerns pipelines, the conditional use permit process is built in. And so it becomes kind of one of those, are you meeting this requirement? Are you meeting this requirement? So staff would end up doing the homework in terms of collecting all the details that we can so that we can educate the boards in an objective fashion on laying out what the scenario is if there ever happened to be an application that comes in. And so the Iowa Utilities Board is a permitting body. It's a state utility permitting body that the potential applicants have to apply to these respective boards, fill out criteria. So they're collecting a lot of information about path, about how far they're back from structures, et cetera. So much of the things that the local boards look for in conditional use, they're being asked some of those questions at the state level. But what's being kind of sorted out is that relationship on how much authority the state could actually grab from the county there. And so it generally looks like at this point where zoning can be quite limited when it comes to the placement of those respective structures.
So instead of asking questions A, B, C, D, you're going to ask A, B,
Well,
C, D, D, all taken
it depends because like with any conditional use permit application, the applicant is going to be given the criteria. And they're going to be responding to the criteria that they have. Then, so what we would recommend is we would ask for probably what are you submitting to other agencies? We do that, often when we submit to you different reports, criteria, we stick that in the packet, et cetera. So based on the current infrastructure, kind of maybe doing a brainstorming session, what are the type of things that help them explain the criteria to the county? So they have the 6 criteria, they have the 2, they're very broad in nature. So the question is, if staff and the zoning commission, kind of in particular, look at where can we get specific? We need to know these things so that we can analyze the criteria. So if we're analyzing the criteria and we're making a decision based upon criteria here, how are they rooted in? So kind of generally the recommendation is that the Board of Supervisors would have the ability to do a resolution. A resolution is not an ordinance. A resolution is a statement that comes from the board that can direct or ask. Here's a resolution saying, okay, we recognize and understand that the Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment hold this authority to do this. So here's a list of criteria where they would possibly, in their whereases or their statements, saying that we would ask you to ask this because this might amplify this criteria. So everything has to be carefully and legally rooted into what the county has to ask. Now, with the other proposed ordinances, all of these ordinances in a way, including the county ordinances, are out there to protect public health and safety and all of the things that the county is empowered to do. And with that said, ordinances can all possibly lead to similar paths depending on how they're written, et cetera. And kind of looking at, the different perspectives there, there's different routes that can get folks to different places as it comes to the permitting. What we're still kind of looking at is, again, the role of the Iowa Utilities across the whole. And other ordinances that, as we have listed, like with Shelby, there's a question there in terms of putting that into effect. If you pass an ordinance, there's a lot of times, how does that fit specifically with the comp plan, the comprehensive plan? Everything that the county does, zoning decisions have to be related directly to a generalized plan. Specifically, the decisions across the board. And so any ordinance that comes out of things would likely need to be rooted together so that there's a wider scale package. And so there can be things that are left uncertain in general. And as you know, the way Board of Adjustment works, zoning commission works, the Board of Adjustment isn't always the final decision. The district court is actually the next step for the Board of Adjustment if a disagreement is made kind of in that realm there. So there's always possibilities that challenges and things to county policies can come across the board. And so with that said, there's definitely some proposals out there that which again will be shared with zoning commission, et cetera. Conditional use permit criteria is there. And there's definitely questions that can be asked, but again, without any type of specific application or anything, this is just as hypothetical as asking about what the next borrow pit would be, or the next tower application would be. So it's just kind of in general, that there's possibilities out there for ordinance criteria to be amended, just like with any part of zoning. And so I'm just simply bringing this up as information and discussion to let you know that those situations are out there. And if you watch the Board of Supervisors proceedings, that's definitely been discussed. And again, it will be brought up before the zoning commission.
These were brought up. I'm curious on this, there'll be several different each property.
Yeah, good question. The conditional use permit application would likely be submitted as wherever the proposed line would be. And so what happens is they would have to label parcels, and each parcel would have to be connected and brought together. And then under the role of the conditional use, the board members have to study the specific area. And so there could be a multitude of parcels. So each and every single affected property would become a major list. And we oftentimes think of the localized site plan. See the localized site plan where a proposed conditional use is, you would see across the board a long list of properties that are defined. And so it's a large scale conditional use permit depending on the magnitude. And like I said before, I know when John Palello was zoning administrator, there was a pipeline or so that did go before the boards under the conditional use, and the zoning commission reviewed it. The Board of Adjustment looked at it, and they had to follow much of the criteria for the Iowa Utilities Board has done. So there's some precedent of different types of lines or segments of lines that have went through there, but across the board, and going back to the land use summary table, which I know you're all very familiar with, anytime an application hits there, that becomes the zoning issue. That's where applications kind of come through the board. So I guess kind of in a nutshell to summarize everything that I said is there's proposals out there to look at some other criteria. Staff sees that there's infrastructure in place and would likely recommend that the supervisors adopt some questions tied into the criteria to assist the stakeholders or the boards in terms of understanding the criteria. So pretty much what I've got there. So.
A lot of work. it's just kind of a lot to put together, so thanks for doing that, updating us. Do you have a question, Tom, comment? So with that, we move on to, the permitting of the special events.
Yes, last month, actually, it's one topic above there, the permitting of RAGBRAI special events.
Okay, specific to Ragbri, okay, so,
The zoning, as you know, the Board of Supervisors are interested in fixing the zoning restrictions as it pertains to selling of goods or services along the RAGBRAI route.
well, this was just specific to Ragbri.
And for some background, last month I asked for some assistance in terms of looking at how we address the RAGBRAI issue. And I had a meeting with the county attorney's office, and page 65 of your packet shows a proposed fix. And what we found in our meeting was right before the table of land use and the zoning ordinance, they actually make the statement temporary use, but then it's never defined in the rest of the ordinance. And so what we came up with on page 65 was to basically fix the ordinance directly under RAGBRAI. So under the table of land use, the proposal would be to add special event RAGBRAI, and then add another one called special event RAGBRAI with alcohol. And what the concept would be under this proposal is to allow folks to sell goods or services, everything except for alcohol, on the RAGBRAI route from private land a day before, setting up a day before the RAGBRAI event and closing down after RAGBRAI event, simply letting landowners handle that on their own. In other words, without any permit, they just can go do it as long as they go and meet the Siouxland District Health regulations, et cetera. Get the thumbs up from them if they're gonna sell maybe a package good or something. They've got some regulations to go through. If all that looks good, they can do that from the RAGBRAI route. However, based upon the spirit of our ordinance, we added in there, if you want to sell alcohol, you can do the other stuff, but you have to come to the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustment to review a site plan and to see if the sales of alcohol will fit with that area. And so this was kind of put in the ordinance as a way to allow the temporary event to happen, no alcohol. But if they want to set up some type of tent, it would have to come to some type of zoning. And so the idea is to possibly fix this early on in the year so that everybody will know that this is officially Woodbury County's policy. If we want to set up some sort of a tent out there, we have to go to the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustment and
Is that what other counties do?
Other counties have actually, some have passed actual RAGBRAI ordinances.
Or they have to go, if they want to, like for the alcohol thing, I'm just thinking about the permitting and advance notice and all of that kind of stuff. That they would have to go to the zoning, planning and zoning and or Board of Adjustment. Both, so they would have to come to two separate meetings and make their request for their permit.
Well, basically for the alcohol. So it's basically saying that everything else is allowed under a sunset temporary basis. So from ag land, wherever they put the route, ag land, it would be fine. But if you wish to sell alcohol, because we have this in our commercial districts, we've had folks come to this board to ask for alcohol. So,
Like at the fair.
yeah, like with
when
the
they did
fair
that.
and everything. And that's been typically when we make these type of zoning proposals or requests, we look at the spirit of the ordinance and what has been out there. And what happens is when somebody does desire to get out, sell alcohol, what happens is I get a phone call from the auditor's office because they go to the auditor's office to get a liquor license. And then the Board of Supervisors ultimately have to approve that. So there's a check there. But in order to go through the Board of Supervisors, they call me and say, do they meet zoning? And I said, well, they don't appear to meet zoning right now. And the point is that to meet zoning under the alcohol realm, which they couldn't meet that right now. But with this fix, they could go through the proceedings, show us where it's at, specifically have a set of plans to deliver to the board, et cetera, and then possibly get the thumbs up. And then when you've reviewed past alcohol, you've seen the records where, okay, they went for the licensing here, they got approval here. So it's sort of a catch-all scenario that they have all the paperwork and kind of consider public safety and the proper measures for regulating their event for the most part. So I'm simply delivering this proposal. I'm gonna again show it with the zoning commission on Wednesday and possibly have them consider this and schedule it for a public hearing to amend the ordinance. The county attorney's office basically found it to be the most feasible to have this continue to be a zoning issue. We did look at it as a standalone type of scenario, but it does fit directly with the zoning ordinance and with the legacy of the zoning ordinance. And it does allow us to offer a definition of what temporary use is on a specific case. So if we ever identify any future items that may be fit under the temporary use, maybe we could look at future amendments that directly do that. The zoning commission before, I know your board touched on it a bit too. Zoning commission was worried that there would be kind of a wide, broad approach to it that might actually restrict other rights. And so the kind of the two-pronged process was to specifically get something in there that looks at RAGBRAI, because RAGBRAI is a rotating event. It will come back to Woodbury or Sioux City or surrounding areas, Sergeant Bluff, Salem, Salone, probably at different times. And so because of the frequency of that type of event, we see it as a reasonable concept to place into the zoning, which again allows groups, community groups could go make a deal with a property owner, stay off of the right of way, still be able to provide a bottle of water or snacks, those type of things to the bikers as they commence through Woodbury County event. So the language that was presented in the packet is hopes to do that and not create unintended consequences. Because when you specifically look at RAGBRAI, you're not affecting the broad scope of how other people operate their rights for special events. So that's all I've got for that one. That kind of segues into special events.
It does, yep. So now we're moving on to information discussion on the permitting of special events.
Okay, so again, if we go to the very last page of the packet, this is what I shared with you last month. This is what Polk County, Des Moines does. They actually have a conditional use permit for basically any type of major special event, which again, zoning commission was concerned about enumerating those different things. Obviously, folks can use their private property to an extent to hold an event, a family-related event, or something to celebrate something in nature. But once you rise up to the commercialization of something, that could be a whole different thing. So I simply put this out there to think that, well, maybe in the future, we would consider things on a specific case by case like we did with RAGBRAI, or is there a general fix across the board? So just simply put that out there again as to sort of kind of separate out RAGBRAI from how we define special event. So that's all I've got.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on that for Dan or any other discussion? Seeing none, I guess, move on to item 6.
Public comment.
Yep. Any more public comment on matters not on the agenda?
I live at 6 Charles Avenue, and that pipeline wants to open the property. Further talk tonight about putting a building over a leach line or a clean line. I've heard talk about hauling liquor on RAGBRAI, but that is a bomb in your backyard. So I don't think we should be afraid of the IUB taking any authority away from us at all. I think we should put the strongest possible ordinances in place that we can possibly do, because the setbacks are not right now sufficient for a project of this scope. It's going to come from south of Sioux City and turn north and go right along the edge of Sioux City up into South Dakota. The other one will come from Nebraska and South Dakota and cut diagonally across Iowa. So we're looking at 2 pipelines here of that magnitude in our county. So I think you should probably realize that once, if they get their permit granted by a utilities board, it's going to be very difficult to put any sort of restriction on them at all after that happens. So I think that needs to be a priority. And I'm getting a lot of information here tonight about all the system works, and Dan tells us a lot, telling us how it all comes together and who does what and who grants what and how the system all works. So I think all these 3 entities need to get together and work on this right away. And the Shelby County ordinance is an excellent example of some ordinances that could be put in place to regulate these pipelines. Because your gas line runs at about 700 pounds of pressure. This runs at over 3 times that pressure. And so if there is rupture of the pipeline, the effect would be catastrophic and it really would. So it would be a disaster that we don't want to have happen. So, and if you want, I can give you my phone number and my email if you have any questions, or just to appear and get more information at any time. But I really need to get this moving.
Discussed earlier, the Iowa Utility Board has probably the most authority in all this.
Special zones.
Oh, yeah, I was just
Yeah,
gonna that.
it's that.
Yeah, okay, one. It's our understanding that the counties can have a moratorium on pipelines since so has not even regulated this type of pipeline. This is a different type of pipeline than gas, natural gas or oil or whatever. If FEMA has not set out any regulations, and they're saying it's gonna take 2 years to get those regulations from out. So I think we're jumping the gun if we're gonna approve these pipelines in Iowa before the federal government has even written the rules for it yet. This is a very dangerous thing. I read an article today that happened. I was prepared to speak to me. Sorry. But it happened in a different country where there was carbon dioxide release from a lake. And it killed almost 2,000. And I don't know how many had livestock. When you have 4 minutes to get out of this pipeline leak or rupture before you are going to suffer the consequences. And death is very likely. So I think this is something that the county can offer some different ordinances to. I think we have to go along with, with utility boards. Especially in light of the money that is flowing. And I hate to mention this, but it's pretty much has come up in a lot of articles that there is a direct pipeline from the originator of the carbon pipeline in Iowa to different members in the legislature and government. And I don't think they're fair to the rest of this. Some people are not being heard. So, again, if you have questions, I'm not an expert, but I do a lot. Remember, we are the taxpayers, and we have a right to live safely in our homes. That we have, our families have owned for my husband's family has owned our land for since the 1880s. And now all of a sudden it's not what it's saying. Doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure you're listening again.
Thank you. We're down to item 7 now.
Yeah.
Are there any board comments or inquiries tonight on anything we've heard or presented? Seeing none, I will move down to staff update. Do we have anything else from you, Dan, or?
Just that, zoning commission will be meeting on Wednesday on a special meeting and I'll be running similar items by them that were on your agenda, and of course supervisors will meet tomorrow night. Other than that, I don't have any additional.
Okay. So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Pam.
All in favor, say aye, yeah. No,